Hi and welcome. Today I have a pretty colorful art tag for you, sorry. And so I'm starting with just some standard cardstock because I'm not going to be inking directly on the cardstock, so it doesn't have to be anything great. I've cut mine on my Cricut, but you do whatever process you do or buy them already pre-made. And I'm taking a vintage book page. This is from a vintage spelling book I found recently on a trip looking at vintage things in vintage shops. And I ran across this and picked it up for a buck or two maybe. And I love it because it's got just listings of words. I just think that's so cool. So I took my Tombow glue stick and glued it to the cardstock. For me, lightweight paper like old book paper secures and lays better when it is laid down with a glue stick. Doesn't bubble as much, but honestly it's hard not to get a bubble or two in old paper, at least for me. Maybe there's some secret method that I don't know about, which is very possible. And so anyways, I'm sticking it down and just trying to cover up as much as I can, get as much wording as I can, and then trimming to size. Now, I normally will seal book paper just because it's going to absorb everything and there's no, second chances. It's not gonna, you can't get it off. You could cover it up and do it again. So I'm just getting out a bunch of colors because I'm really not sure where I'm going to land with this one. And so I was thinking purples or blues and actually I end up doing mostly greens. So I do get some distress sprays out, and I'm going to start with those. I have shabby shutters, and that's just a distress spray stain. And then also salvaged patina. And let's see, what color was that? Maybe crushed olive. Oh, the first one I think was old paper. And then shabby shutters. It just looks kind of green on the page. And I'm going to be adding some with Stencil, so I'm just trying those out, which one I want while I'm drawing. And here comes the salvage patina. And I wasn't really liking it because the green just kind of turned it greenish, salvage patina. And I'm just using my little fan brush and just kind of spreading it around. I don't really want it to lay clean anywhere. I want it to be kind of streaky. So I'm just using that to spread it around. And then drying it off. And I have this trellis-like stencil. I think I cut it on my Cricut years ago or a few years ago, so I think that's where that came from. And I'm using evergreen bough and peacock feathers as colors and just kind of mixing them up. And applying it directly to the stencil. And mixing the inks like that will not damage or alter the ink pads unless you don't want to mix oxide with stain. Then the oxide, the one that's not oxide, is going to be oxide. So you don't want to do that. So I added a little water and then laid my stencil on top, giving it a little trellis look. And I think I knocked some of those areas back. Because I didn't want to be real dark. And my intention here was I was hoping to lighten it up a little bit. And so I took antique linen and went over the top, and I actually think it darkened it. So lesson learned, you know, it's not really gonna lighten it up. I did try adding some water and lifting it off, but it hardly lifted anything off because it's just soaked right into the paper. So yeah, I'm not sure that made it any lighter. I think it maybe made it a little darker, maybe a little more yellow. But it is what it is. And I'm just going to go around the edges with some walnut stain. You're really not going to see a whole lot of the background anyways by the time I am done. And I'm going to add a little bit of texture paste just on the left side. And I have the stencil from Tim Holtz, and it's kind of like little diamonds. And the farther you get to the right side of the stencil, they kind of become real tiny diamonds. So I do move my stencil over just to get that edge over there. And I will mention again that I have added a couple spritz of water to my texture paste because it was getting a little dry and crusty, and that seemed to help. I've done that twice and I think it's improving each time, so I'll probably add a couple more spritz next time. So I'm just adding a little bit of texture paste onto the tag, and I'm going to grab some distress glaze and just sprinkle it onto the texture paste. Because it's not really in its real moist condition that it often is, it's sticks sporadically, but enough to where you get little glints, that's not right, little bits of shine and color and in different areas. I do use my brush to kind of clean up some of the areas a little bit, and I think I even use a brush to add a little bit more glaze onto a few of the spots, and then I have to set it aside to dry, which in its current condition doesn't take as long because it's drier than normal, but I'm just glad it's usable. Now, instead of using a clean piece of paper when I did this, I used it on a one I've been working on. So I dropped a little piece of texture paste into my glaze and just use some tweezers to get it out. No permanent damage. And so now I'm just setting it aside to dry. So I did emboss it at some point that didn't get on camera, so that's already done, but mainly you just use your heat tool and let the glaze melt. If your texture paste wasn't dry, it would bubble, so you just want to make sure that it's dry. Unless you like the bubble, there's nothing wrong with it, it just won't, it's not going to lay flat, although sometimes it does deflate even after it bubbles. So I'm adding a couple paper strips from Tim Holtz down vertically, and you'll notice maybe that I have a new glue bottle. I'm so happy to be done with that other one. It was clogging up so much, but you know, it's not cheap, so I try to use it until it is totally gone. I will have a story to tell about this glue once I get an answer from the manufacturer, but so stay tuned for that at some point. So I had I think both of these were partial strips of paper strips. I always keep every little piece because you never know when you might just need a small piece to go on. And I've pulled out this flower, and it came in a digital download, and I fussy cut out most of it. I left some of the center because that would have been very difficult to do. I'll have that link in the description, and I'm going to be adding a couple other pieces of ephemera, some from Tim Holtz and some not. Like that little blue label I'm going to get my stamp is from one of the ephemera packs. I don't know which one. A lot of them have those little labels. And I'm taking a stamp from the Field Notes stamp set and stamping it. And the little butterfly is, I'll have that linked in the digital links as well. The one thing I will say about the digital files is I try to buy ones, it's not always the case, but I try to buy ones where they provide individual files for each piece. And then they'll provide a page or pages where they have assembled them all onto a PDF where you can print out a whole page that they've got already laid out. The trouble with that is you might want something smaller or bigger. Like to get a butterfly that size, I typically have to take the individual pictures and shrink it onto another program and then create a PDF out of it and print it, or print it from the program. So they can be versatile in size if you are purchasing it that way. Sometimes all you get is the PDF file with it all onto one page, which makes it harder. I guess you can take little pictures of it and snips of it and do it that way, but it's not going to be as clean of a picture. The number I'm putting down there is from a digital download. And then at the very bottom, I'm adding a number strip from Tim Holtz. I'll add some vintage photo around the edges. And I like to give those number strips a little crease in the center. Do it a lot. I don't know why, it just, I like it. And the last thing I'm going to do, let me just look, I think everything else is done, is punch a hole and add a ribbon. And because the piece is pretty busy, I would say, there's a lot going on, I am just going to do the ribbon with one color, and I use a rayon seam binding, which really takes the color well, and it gets kind of crinkly and messy, and I like that. But I think I'm just doing antique linen just to kind of give it a little more neutral color. And then they dry real quick and I put it on, and that will be all I do for this piece. After that, I'll have some final pictures at the end, and if you haven't subscribed, please do. I would invite you to do that. And actually, that might be old paper. Yes, that's old paper, not antique linen. And if you liked the piece, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. But other than that, stay tuned for my final picks, and I will see you next time.